ahead and get started. We've got one individual running just a little bit late, but we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for being here today. We certainly appreciate you all coming. We're here to release the report of our special examination of the policies, internal controls, and operations of the Administrative Office of Courts. Our examination, which probably is already posted on our website, auditor.ky.gov, looks at the AOC's operations between July 1st, 2015 and June 30th, 2017. Now, to the best of our knowledge, there has never previously been a comprehensive external audit, review, or examination of AOC, and obviously this should not be the last time that we've had this type of review. Our report contains 20 findings and identifies a wide range of areas that definitely need corrective action. Overall, we found disorganized and unchecked leadership in a number of the areas at AOC. Essentially, AOC failed to follow many of its own policies and often simply didn't have sufficient policies to provide transparency and oversight. This resulted in weak internal control structure and an overall lack of accountability. For example, documentation is not consistently required or maintained for things such as exceptions to competitive bidding, private sector leases, credit card transactions, and employee personal miles. Furthermore, AOC's internal audit department reported to the Executive Officer of Administrative Services, who also oversaw multiple areas that could be subject to audit. This organizational structure created a lack of independence, since the same person who oversaw internal audits, facilities, and various other areas of operations. For example, according to AOC, internal audits related to local courthouse facility payments were modified by the former executive officer, which resulted in underpayments to some counties and overpayments to others. Now, while many of these issues identified in our findings occurred within the department of the former executive officer of Administrative Services, I want to be clear, AOC's management in general did not adequately monitor or oversee all areas of operations. In the absence of effective oversight from either within AOC or an external source, even conscientious employees may become careless, and some employees may be tempted to take advantage of the situation for personal benefit. One of the areas we examined was AOC's vehicle and surplus sales. It turns out employee-only surplus sales were raised before our work even began. Our auditors found AOC did not follow advice documented in a 2010 memo from its legal counsel regarding how to conduct a surplus property sales. Instead, AOC held employee-only surplus sales and engaged in additional individual sale transactions from 2012 to 2016. Even more concerning, the former executive officer of Administrative Services participated in the sales as a buyer, while this very same individual also determined which items would be sold, set the sales price, and coordinated the sales, all with little to no oversight from other AOC staff. This former executive officer purchased multiple items at employee-only sales and oversaw, including 2 vehicles that were advertised as having 47,000 and 79,000 more miles than what records show they actually had. We found several issues with the reported mileage of vehicles sold. Of the 15 vehicles sold during the employee-only surplus sales, the mileage on 10 of those vehicles was incorrect in advertisements for the sale. Some were advertised with higher mileage, some lower, but the 2 largest discrepancies we found were the vehicles purchased by the executive officer. Our finding related to this surplus property sale will be referred to the Office of the Attorney General for further investigation. Additionally, 2 Supreme Court justices purchased surplus property in private transactions that were not advertised and not part of the employee sales event. One purchased a vehicle and another purchased furniture. AOC revised its policy on surplus property sales in April of 2017 after media coverage of the sales. We also found during our examination of surplus car sales that an AOC employee purchased 2 vehicles during the 2016 sale, which were transferred to persons not employed by AOC. AOC did not have effective policies or other controls in place to prevent these things from happening. The AOC director described the policymaking process as fractured, and said policies were all over the place. Auditors found policies that AOC are scattered, conflicting, and ambiguous, with each department often creating its own policies with no centralized review process or location for policies. And we found that AOC management is largely reactive in addressing problems as they arise, but even known problems were worked around, or in some cases just completely ignored. For example, AOC maintains 3 separate databases for inventory. The third database was created because one department did not trust the data entry of another department. Rather than addressing this problem, a third database was created. Now, due to this and other factors, auditors identified at least $2 million in inventory system errors, which puts AOC at high risk for assets to go missing. To illustrate this risk, with a specific example, AOC was notified in April of 2017 of 2 laptops missing from an order. Because AOC does not have good inventory controls in place, it is unclear if the 2 laptops were stolen or if the order was short. And the employee who confirmed receipt of the order did acknowledge he did not even count the laptops when they came in. As a further example of the ineffective controls related to surplus property and inventory, you can see in this photo we have on display some of the disorganization found at AOC's warehouse. Several other photos our auditors took on inventory storage at their warehouse can be found in our full report. Additionally, our examination found that elected and appointed officials at AOC have failed to set a proper tone regarding consistent treatment between those officials and other government employees at the agency. For example, AOC practice is to allow elected or appointed officials to submit reimbursement requests directly to the Division of Accounting and Purchasing with no other authorization required for processing. Another example is that the Supreme Court justices are reimbursed for meals at a rate $16 to $39 higher than other employees. During our interview with AOC's executive director, she told us some AOC employees had taken a, quote, verbal beating from elected officials. Now, AOC does not have the power to remove elected officials, but it should maintain order on administrative matters. All elected officials, including myself, can and should be held accountable to policies and procedures. During our examination, we learned that the Chief Justice shares administrative policy-making decisions with the other members of the state Supreme Court. Sharing authority on administrative policymaking has led to a slow process. For example, the creation of personnel policies for AOC under this management structure took 2 years. In another instance, it was reported to our auditors that the Chief Justice was outvoted by other members of the court on policy changes related to lodging reimbursements for the justices that would have reduced the amount of the reimbursements. In addition, these meetings of the court are not open to the public because AOC has not adopted an open meeting policy similar to the law that applies to the other branches of government. Just last summer, the Supreme Court approved an open records policy, but ironically, it was approved during a closed-door meeting. Now, another concern our auditors cite from the examination relates to ethics policies within AOC. We found that ethics rules are scattered, not well developed, and unlike the executive branch, AOC has no independent ethics enforcement commission for its staff. Conflicts of interest are not specifically prohibited or subject to punishment under AOC policy. Employees are only required to report a conflict. In the current wording of the policy is vague and open-ended when it comes to addressing conflicts of interest. Also, there is no policy in place to address conflicts related to private sector leases. In one situation, AOC leases office space from a company owned by the son of a Supreme Court justice. There's no written policy at AOC to prohibit leasing property from related parties, and no policy on whether or when it is acceptable to lease from a related party. Now, in this particular situation I just referenced, the documentation contained in the lease file also failed to provide a reason why the property was selected when it cost 3 times more than an alternative proposal for office space. Now, our auditors also found that AOC failed to properly report taxable personal benefits from take-home vehicles assigned to justices and other AOC personnel. In addition to benefits being calculated incorrectly, information required to determine personal mileage is not always submitted. AOC acknowledged it does not follow its vehicle use policy requiring monthly reporting of personal mileage. For example, one Supreme Court justice had failed to report personal mileage for nearly a 2-year period. After our auditors inquired, the justice reported personal mileage for a 17-month period, and he got it down to the submission down to a 1/10 of a mile. The same justice personal mileage for a period of approximately 4 months was not reported and is unaccounted for. Our finding on these taxable benefit issues will be referred to the Kentucky Department of Revenue and to the IRS. As I mentioned early on, in some instances, policies were not followed. In others, AOC does not have policies in place at all. For example, the majority of credit card purchases made by the Chief Justice and the AOC Director lacked any supporting documentation. There was no pre-approval or subsequent review of the credit card activity by anyone other than the cardholder, and no cardholder agreements were required for key officials to issue a credit card. In addition, several AOC Pro Card purchases lacked pre-approval and adequate supporting documentation. In one instance, the AOC Director instructed a staff member to purchase personalized mint julep cups for State Justice Institute board members at the request of the Chief Justice's spouse. The total cost of those cups was a little more than $410, and they were given to board members when Kentucky hosted an institute meeting in 2016. While it certainly may have been a nice gesture, the purchase of gifts like custom mint julep cups is not a legitimate business purpose for the use of public funds. There are many other areas of concern which are discussed in detail among our 20 findings, including issues with IT security, giving unnecessary access to some current employees, and allowing former employees continued access to electronic court records, as in one case, well over a year after separation from employment. Now, on some of the issues we identified, my staff will be providing training to AOC employees. As I mentioned earlier, the complete report, including our response from AOC, is now on our website at auditor.ky.gov. I do want to acknowledge and thank Chief Justice John Minton and AOC Director Laurie Dutton for requesting my office come in and conduct this examination. And while I am certainly appreciative that AOC invited us in, and I am appreciative that they have embraced some of our recommendations, their dismissive attitude toward key recommendations towards ethics and accountability, that particular attitude towards that really quite sad. And to be honest with you, I expected better. For example, one of our recommendations is for the General Assembly to require an annual external audit of AOC, with the Auditor of Public Accounts having a right of first refusal to perform the audit. This would provide an important layer of this would provide oversight and transparency, but it would also give AOC management an objective look into its financial and internal control practices on an ongoing basis. In their response, AOC says The discretion on whether to have audits should be left up to the Supreme Court so as not to violate the separation of powers. But in 1980, the Supreme Court stated in unanimous opinion that the General Assembly has a legitimate and necessary right to audit funds that are appropriated by the legislative branch. Therefore, the Supreme Court's own decision supports our recommendation that the legislature may require an annual financial statement audit of AOC. Furthermore, this examination shows why external audits are needed. Perhaps the most disappointing thing in AOC's response is the AOC has no role in holding elected officials accountable. This argument, to me, is certainly indefensible. No one, including judges, should be above the law. Also, AOC's statement that our exam found no instances of waste, fraud, or abuse within the agency is just frankly wrong. From using taxpayers' dollars to buy mint julep cups, missing laptops, questionable spending on agency credit cards, and leasing office space from a justice from a company owned by members of his own family. Well, these are just a few examples of the culture that has created an absence of accountability. Now, while arguing that the Supreme Court should continue setting administrative policies as a body, AOC also disagreed with the recommendation to make these meetings open to the public. AOC's position on open meetings shows a lack of willingness to be at least as transparent as other governmental bodies. No matter whether it's the judicial, legislative, or executive branch, we as leaders in our Commonwealth owe it to our taxpayers of Kentucky to strive towards openness and transparency. Now, I urge Chief Justice Minnick, as the head of AOC, to address all the issues identified in our examination. I believe the recommendations in our report, fully supported and implemented, would change the culture at AOC and provide taxpayers with the transparency and accountability we deserve from our judicial branch of government. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. At this time, I'm open to some general questions. If we have some things that are more technical in nature, we could have staff available.
Mike, are you interfacing? There's also reportedly an FBI investigation over at AOC. Are you working with them on this at all?
We have not. From our standpoint, we've got a referral to the Attorney General's office. It is our understanding that they were doing some additional investigation themselves. In addition, from the standpoint, finding 12, that was finding 6, the Attorney General doing surplus property. Finding 12, dealing with some of the personal benefits that weren't reported to the IRS. We are making that referral. Yes.
Your referrals to the Attorney General and the IRS.
Yes.
Do you believe that there were criminal things that would happen here that need to be prosecuted?
That's not, we are a reporting agency. Our job is to find the information, confirm the information, and then report the information. Whether or not they're criminal or not, that would be up to the Attorney General or other agencies.
But at least referring it seems to
referring it indicates that there is a problem, that we have a concern there, that we did want to make sure. And as we said, it was our knowledge that they were actually, or at least based on the report we have seen, that they were working on something.
In general,
yes.
I mean, you've audited a lot of agencies,
yes.
large and small.
Yes.
Where would you rank this? How serious are the problems at AOC that you found relative to other audits you've overseen?
Yes. Well, as we've indicated, we feel like this particular audit is historic for multiple reasons. One, to the best of our knowledge, as we said early on, there's never been an external audit or review of AOC. And given that they are a full branch of government, we feel like it's both historic as well as obviously with 20 findings. We have some significant concerns, and as I said, we are glad that they are embracing some of them, but some of the key ones dealing with transparency, accountability, ethics. I'm very disappointed that they did not embrace them through the response.
Yes. You mentioned Justice Minton in your comments. Who are the other Supreme Court justices that have been found in this audit that have been involved in activity that your auditors found concerning?
There's several items listed. Probably the one that came out a couple of times in regards was Justice Wright dealing with the leases, as well as he was an individual that turned in personal mileage for 17 months after the process.
I'm sorry, which justice?
Justice Wright.
And when it comes to the lease, I believe your report states that there was a memo that was the sole determining document that was used to determine whether, which lease to purchase. And it didn't mention the relationship in that memo. But there was some type of other disclosure.
There was some other disclosure that indicated the relationship, but from the standpoint, there was no documentation included that our auditors found that indicated why they had chosen the one lease over the other lease, given that it was the one with the sons of the justice was 3 times as much.
Did you ever get an explanation from Justice Wright or somebody at AOC about why they chose?
We have not. We offered AOC the opportunity to respond to our audit. They provide that response. That response is included in our audit, and then obviously we're going to reply to the response. So that was not included.
Regarding the separation of the different branches, what recourse is there if the AOC simply ignores the report or doesn't do specific things that you recommend?
True. I mean, from the standpoint, obviously they are a separate branch, and as we discussed, the structure of our Constitution is such that they're not only separate, but there's also checks and balances. The executive branch has a check on both the judicial and the legislative. The legislative branch, by appropriating funds, has a check on the judicial branch as well as the executive branch. And so there are multiple avenues. From our standpoint, as I said, we are a reporting agency. It's our role to shine the light on situations, and then it's up to the other 3 branches to work with.
And then just a follow up to his question earlier.
Yes.
Did you say that you have spoken with the FBI then about some of this?
I have not spoken with you.
I think that from your office or your agencies.
To the best of my knowledge.
There was another thing that was just kind of quickly mentioned in the audit, but I had not heard anything about. But the sale of firearms, private sales of firearms, were going on in the AOC. Could you give us more details on what was going on?
Well, on some of the more technical issues or some of the issues addressed specifically on that, when we're done with the press conference, we've got some staff available.
Well, I wanted to ask for some elaboration on the lease. That was Justice Wright, and which I'm sure it's in the report. Though,
well, from the standpoint, of course, we have staff available to answer specific regards to each justice. In our reports, we generally don't mention ton of names. Usually, we'll just mention the justice or type along the lines. The Justice Wright was the one specifically, regarding the one that was 3 times as much as documentation regarding the sons.
And the lease was to a company owned by his sons.
Yes.
Or,
and we can get you more technical detail. Yes.
Who was the executive officer, former executive officer who was involved in buying those cars?
That was Scott Brown.
I'm sorry?
Scott Brown.
And so he's filed a whistleblower lawsuit against the agency. And has that complicated things in terms of where it stands with holding an accountable?
We didn't look at that issue specifically. I mean, Scott Brown himself, his attorney, provided us with some information of their concerns, as well as we had staff read some of the depositions, or read through the depositions that he provided. But we were looking at the overall control and accountability structure of it.
But and you were able to confirm at least one allegation that he made about the justice that purchased, or at least the office space from his sons, right? So you were able to confirm that in the audit. Were there any other aspects of the whistleblower lawsuit that you were able to confirm?
Once the press conference is over, I'll let you talk to some staff. This particular one, our report was approximately 100, and then with all the additions, it's a little over 200 pages. So.
And in terms of the scale, right? So I know that they requested the audit. So they requested between 2015 and 2017. But a lot of the stuff that you found, especially regarding surplus sales, dated back farther than that. Do you think that it should have been expanded farther than just 2015?
Well, we covered, that was our scope, but sometimes we did have to go outside of that scope, as mentioned in the report. Sometimes we would step out, but our main focus was during that time.
What did it cost the AOC for this audit?
Our estimate is about $125,000.
Is that billed to the agency or is that?
That would do it. We do it to the agency.
Do you believe the current director should remain in office?
That is not a decision for us to make. That is a decision for Justice Minton, and based on some of the things that they've indicated to us, and perhaps the Supreme Court.
There will be people who see our coverage, read our stories, watch our stories, who lose faith in the Kentucky Supreme Court that they can be a body that can truly judge. They'll be worried that there's corruption involved. Are you concerned that this Kentucky Supreme Court can continue to operate as it's had with questions about potential financial corruption?
I think it's important, as I indicated earlier, that they embrace all our recommendations. Certainly, I was thinking this morning how to address this particular situation, and I was thinking, I still have a tremendous amount of faith in all our government, but the role of our particular office is try to get different branches of government or just aspects of government back on track. We feel like the judiciary in this particular case, or AOC, has gotten a little off track. And I don't want to compare myself, necessarily to this being like a parent, but I think about my own kids. Sometimes your kids, you've got to discipline. Sometimes your kids are going to be critical to them. Sometimes you hope your kids will follow direction, but you don't stop loving them. You don't stop loving your country. You don't stop loving the Constitution. You just continue to work to try to make them better. And that's our role at the Auditor of Public Accounts. Our role is to try to make government better.
A follow-up to Tom's question. I know it's not your decision,
Right?
whether she should be removed.
Correct.
But do you think she should be removed? Based
Well,
on
and
everything that you have said?
as I said, I think that's the decision for it. I don't think that's something that I should like.
And what's going on in this photo? Is this just
This
state
is their
property?
store. This is their
This is just state property?
Yeah, the storage. This is their storage.
How much money do you think the AOC costs the taxpayer with all the findings?
Right, and that's difficult to determine. I mean, basically, our role is to look at the controls and look at what's going on with them. Obviously, in regarding to the courthouses, they need to go back and take a look at that and see if they've had any years. All our information is based on some of their internal audits, so it would be difficult to put from the standpoint of losses or gains in that regard. But definitely, there's a need for greater transparency, greater accountability, and certainly a need for more controls to be put in place. As I said, we all have to be accountable to someone, including myself, and so it's important that they have those accountabilities in place. Any other questions?
Who audits the auditor's office?
When I was on the campaign trail, I had that same question. You know what I found out? I found out that our peer group, auditors, we actually had one come in, I guess it was just a year or two ago, coming in. We have auditors from other states coming in and audit us, and we received the highest rating possible from that particular audit.
No offense.
No. That's a good question. I had that same question myself.
Just for the record, could you spell your name and your office?
Sure. My name is Mike Harmon, Mikeharmon, and our office is the office that I hold is the Auditor of Public Accounts.
Anything else?
Anything else?
Thank you all.
Thanks for all. We do have staff available if you have additional